What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for MLB Thursday, August 26th.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top DFS picks for today's MLB slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have a 9-game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the pitcher position. So I don't want to mess around here. I like Max Scherzer with a 5% pitching advantage over the San Diego Padres. Max Scherzer is only giving up a .620 OPS versus righties, and he's facing 5 righties tonight. On top of that, the Padres have only hit 28 of his last 130 pitches. That's a .215 batting average and a huge sample size. He's $10,500 FanDuel salary, 100 less on DraftKings, projected at 38 fantasy points here tonight, and he has an ERA of 2.65. His record is 11-4 on the season, pitching an average of 94 pitches per game, averaging 41 fantasy points per game. He scored 42, 43, and 28 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Max Scherzer here versus the San Diego Padres. Okay, let's take a look at the catcher first base position. I like Josh Bell with a 46% batting advantage over Alicia Hernandez. Josh Bell, he bats 3% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .721 OPS versus righties. And Alicia Hernandez, he pitches his worst ball by far to switch hitters. 43% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.262 OPS versus switch hitters. Josh Bell is 1 for 2 with a 1.167 OPS versus Hernandez. He's $3,600 FanDuel salary, only $500 more on DraftKings, projected at 10 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 22, 9, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Josh Bell here versus Alicia Hernandez. Okay, now here's somewhat of a value play for you. I like Jesus Aguilar with a 37% batting advantage over Patrick Corbin. Jesus Aguilar is batting 14% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .898 OPS versus lefties. And Patrick Corbin, he's pitching 23% worse to lefties as he does worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .873 OPS versus righties. Jesus Aguilar is 5 for 18, batting a .278 batting average and a .872 OPS versus Corbin. He's only $2,900 FanDuel salary and $500 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 13, 7, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Jesus Aguilar here versus Patrick Corbin. Now I just spotted this play. He is a super low salary value play. It's Christian Vasquez with a 27% batting advantage over John Gant. Christian Vasquez is batting 8% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .742 OPS versus righties, and John Gant is giving up a .545 OPS versus righties. So John Gant, he does pitch pretty well versus righties, but he's a low salary pitcher, so normally that means he's going to need some more pitches under his belt before these OPS numbers balance out. And Christian Vasquez is only $2,300 FanDuel salary and 800 more on DraftKings. Projected at 8.7 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 7 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 10, 9, and 3 fantasy points in his last 3 games. And I like this pick because on top of his low salary, Vegas thinks there's going to be 10 points or 10 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Christian Vasquez as a value play here versus John Gant. Okay, let's take a look at the second base position. I like Javier Baez with a 35% batting advantage over Alex Wood. Javier Baez is batting 18% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .785 OPS versus lefties. And Alex Wood, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 17% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .873 OPS versus righties. And I like this pick because Javier Baez is 6 for 13, batting a .462 batting average and a 1.577 OPS versus Wood. 2 of those 6 hits are home runs, and 2 of them are doubles. And Javier Baez is $3,200 FanDuel salary. He's $1,900 more on DraftKings. Projected at 10.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 3, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Javier Baez here versus Alex Wood. Okay, now here's a value play for you. I like Andy Ibanez with a 62% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Sam Hentges. Andy Ibanez, he's batting 30% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .821 OPS versus lefties. And Sam Hentges, he pitches 32% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .992 OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Hentges yet, but I like this pick because Andy Ibanez is only $2,700 FanDuel salary, and he's $500 less on DraftKings. Projected at 9 fantasy points here tonight, he's averaging 7 fantasy points per game on the season, but he's been on fire, scoring 15, 9, and 16 fantasy points in his last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Andy Ibanez here versus Sam Hentges.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, and another value play I just caught out of the corner of my eye. Take a look at Nick Solak with a 47% batting advantage over that same low salary pitcher, Sam Hentges. Nick Solak is batting 15% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .731 OPS versus lefties. And Sam Hentges, we know he pitches a .992 OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Hentges yet. And Nick Solak is only $2,300 FanDuel salary, and he's $100 less on DraftKings. Projected at 8.8 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 9, 3, and 19 fantasy points in his last 3 games. And we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game, so I like Nick Solak as a value play here versus Sam Hentges. Okay, let's take a look at the third base position. I like Isaiah Kiner-Falefa with a 44% batting advantage over that same low salary pitcher, Sam Hentges. So it looks like we have an opportunity to stack a couple or 2 to 3 righty batters here versus Sam Hentges, save a bunch of salary in our lineup, and get some good splits. So Isaiah Keener Falafel, he's batting 12% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .748 OPS versus lefties. And Sam Hentges, we know, is giving up a .992 OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Hentges yet. And Isaiah Keener Falafa, he's only $2,700 FanDuel salary. He's $1,000 more on DraftKings. Projected at 9.7 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 6, 15, and 6 fantasy points in his last 3 games. And we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game. So I like this righty stack and Isaiah Keener Falafa here versus Sam Hentges. Now I also like Josh Donaldson batting against Chris Sale. Josh Donaldson is batting a .726 OPS versus lefties, and Chris Sale, surprisingly, is giving up a .952 OPS versus righties. Now, the reason that I like this pick is because Josh Donaldson is 10 for 33 with a .303 batting average and a 1.072 OPS versus Sale. He has 5 home runs out of those 10 hits, and this is a pretty big sample size. So it looks like Josh Donaldson looks like he smashes Chris Sale's pitches for some reason, and he's 3,000 FanDuel salary. He's only 300 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.6 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 28, 28, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 10 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Josh Donaldson here versus Chris Sale. Okay, who do we have at the shortstop position? Here's another value play for you. I like Yanni Hernandez with a 28% batting advantage over that same low salary pitcher, Sam Hentges. So it definitely looks like we can stack up some batters versus Sam Hentges. Yanni Hernandez, he's batting 8% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .576 OPS versus lefties. And Sam Hentges, he pitches his worst ball versus switch hitters, 20% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.044 OPS versus switch hitters. Now, there's no at-bats versus Hentges yet, and I like this pick because Yanni Hernandez is only $2,400 FanDuel salary. He's the same price on DraftKings, projected at 10.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 7 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 9, 6, and 0 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Yanni Hernandez as a value play here versus Sam Hentges. Another value play for you, I like Miguel Rojas with a 66% batting advantage over Patrick Corbin. Miguel Rojas, he's batting 43% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1.160 OPS versus lefties. And Patrick Corbin, he pitches 23% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .873 OPS versus righties. Now, I like this pick because Miguel Rojas is 12 for 29. That's a .414 batting average and a 1.140 OPS versus Corbin. He's only $2,700 FanDuel salary. He's $1,500 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.8 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He's been in a little slump lately, only scoring 0, 0, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like the splits, and I love the batter versus pitcher matchup, and I like the price. So I like Miguel Rojas here versus Patrick Corbin. Okay, moving on to the outfield position. I like Joey Gallo with a 61% batting advantage over James Caprillion. Joey Gallo is batting a .749 OPS versus righties, and James Caprillion, he pitches his worst ball by far to lefty batters, 60% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.279 OPS versus lefties. And Joey Gallo is already 4 for 7, batting a .571 batting average and a 2.524 OPS versus Caprillion. 3 of those 4 hits are for home runs. Joey Gallo is $3,700 FanDuel salary, $500 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 12, and 6 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Joey Gallo here versus James Caprillion. And I also like Franmil Reyes with a 27% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Jordan Lyles. Franmil Reyes is batting 17% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .853 OPS versus righties. And Jordan Lyles, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 10% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .894 OPS versus righties. Franmil Reyes is 1 for 3 with a 1.666 OPS versus Lyles, and that one hit was for a home run. He's $3,100 FanDuel salary, although he is $2,400 more on DraftKings, so I love that FanDuel price. Projected at 10.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 22, 4, and 3 fantasy points in his last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game, so I like Franmil Reyes here versus Jordan Lyles.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.